And now, our last reader of the evening is not in the competition. It's Martha Frankel herself. She likes to pretend she's a tall, thin redhead from the South. And damn it, she'd like us all to pretend that with her. Martha Frankel.
I spent idyllic summers in a bungalow colony in White Lake, New York. My parents, my grandparents, my sister Helene and I, in a teeny tiny bungalow with 3 teenier bedrooms that held nothing but the beds and a narrow lane to walk around them. And yet on weekends, cousins and friends would come up to the country and quilts would be folded and laid on the floor for the kids, and men would take one room and women another, and everyone would sleep like they never did in the city. It was the country air. The bungalows were owned by the Sidranskys, Sophie and Izzy. In the mornings, before we went to day camp, Sophie would make an announcement on the store's loudspeaker.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. This is Sophie Sidransky. The store is now open.
Oh, my God. Everyone in the colony was Jewish except for Dave DiPaolo and his family. Dave ran the day camp. His daughter Katie was my age and one of my best friends. There was a brother, Angelo, and cousins on the weekend, too. No one in my house ever mentioned the DiPaolo's ethnicity. My mother played mahjong at the pool with Mrs. DiPaolo. My grandma baked with their grandma. Our grandpas picked blueberries together. We kids were as comfortable in each other's bungalows as we were in our own. There were no religious services. You notice this didn't happen to anyone but me. There were no religious services at the bungalow colony and no talk of God. We were culturally Jewish, sure, but not one of us would go on to be bat mitzvahed. I wish I could say I remember what happened in the 15 minutes before the story I'm about to tell you happened, but I can't. I do remember that I was wearing those striped pedal pushers that I refused to take off that summer when I was 8, and that my grandma made me lumpy farina just the way I liked it for breakfast, and that my mother was at the sink putting curlers in her wet hair, so it must have been Thursday because my father came up on Thursday nights and she liked her hair just so. I know it was hot because even at 8:30 in the morning I had a sheen of sweat on my upper lip. I met up with Gloria and Ellen and Lynn with an E, the way we did every morning before camp. But that morning we didn't go to the swings or the handball court. No, on that morning we marched up and down in front of the DiPaolo's bungalow, little Israeli flags clutched in our sweaty hands. We didn't say a word. I could see Mrs. DiPaolo looking at us from her kitchen, a parliament stuck to her bottom lip, a bemused look of horror on her face. I saw her mouth the word Dave, although she may have just whispered it because the blood was pounding in my ears. I looked away, down to the ground where my kids sent up little puffs of dust in the gravel. Sophie Sidransky's voice broke our revelry.
Izzy Sidransky, come to the store immediately.
I could probably do this better.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's Friday. The bagels are in the...
Ellen gathered up our flags, stashed them under the porch of her bungalow, and off we all went to camp, where Katie DiPaolo and I held hands half the day and learned to crochet the other half. When I walked into my bungalow at 5 that night, I pretty much thought that morning hadn't happened, but the look on my mother's face changed that. I had hardly ever seen my mother mad, but she was seething. She didn't even bother to take a drag on her Kent. "What did you do?" she asked, but it was not a question she wanted me to answer. "Why on earth would you do that? You don't even know where Israel is. You don't even know what it is. We have never talked anything against the DiPaolos. Where did you learn that? What is wrong with you?" My grandmother, whose ankles were thick as salamis, stood behind my mother anguished. She often told me about the discrimination she had faced in Russia. Shame and embarrassment and fear all mixed in me. I began sobbing and gulping for air. Oh no, my mother said, wagging her finger. You don't get to cry your way out of this. Go wash your face. And then you're going to walk over to the DePaulos alone and apologize. You're going to ask them one by one to tell you how much you hurt them. And you're going to let them tell you without a tear on your face. Go. I did, and it was as humiliating as you would imagine. When I came back, my mother meted out her own punishment. She didn't speak to me for 2 weeks, not a peep. For the rest of the summer, I expected Sophie to begin the day like this. Good morning. This is Sophie. That Martha Frankel is a no-goodnik. Stay away from her. I've thought of that story hundreds of times, thousands. Sometimes I'm not even sure it happened. So I called Gloria, who I'm still friends with. She said she vaguely remembered it, but didn't I have enough in my life to worry about without dredging up the past? I had to say no. I tried getting in touch with Ellen, but she didn't answer my messages. And Lynn with an E is dead. So I asked my sister. Yup, she said, you did that. Why? It's about time you talked about it. Thank you.